when I vomited my paycheck all over the planter just 10 steps from the apartment. This is probably where we differentiate ourselves from other videos because I'm the exact opposite of what Kava is supposed to bring into your life. I remember thinking two things. Number one was everybody needs to learn about this. Number two is sometimes it's good to be stubborn. Hi, my name is Kyle Shigekuni, and this is the Kava Vibes podcast, where we'll explore the rich island cultures and therapeutic wonders revolving around this ritualistic beverage we call kava. Join me as we blend historical with the contemporary, the traditional with the scientific, and together sip from the ceremonial cup of wisdom. Sponsored by Good Kava, connoisseurs of exquisite and rare island kava since 2015. Take flight on your own adventure at drinkroot.com. This is kava powder, and this is a cup of batched kava. The only problem is in order to get from this to this, you'll need to search through a number of videos all showing different techniques, tools, ratios, grinds, temperatures. Some are good, some are pretty inaccurate, and a lot of them waste a good portion of the root. When I drank my first cup of kava about 10 years ago, I had no idea it would be the beginning of a decade-long journey of curiosity and discovery. There weren't YouTube videos and websites that I could reference for back then, so I had to learn the tricks of the trade by reading science journals, books by experts, talking to farmers, and of course, running hundreds of failed experiments on my own. Great kava is not cheap. This is because for great kava to grow, it takes an average of around 4 to 5 years of very careful caretaking and farming. It's kind of like a fine wine in that sense, or fine aged tea. There's always cheaper ones that shortcut the process, but you end up with a weaker, less desirable end product. I don't like to waste the root, partially because I want to respect the time it took for these farmers to properly grow this great kava, but I also don't want to do it because I like getting a good bang for the buck. Because I didn't have YouTube videos or blogs, it was more of a manageable situation, even though it took some time, which I'm actually grateful for. Nowadays, I kind of feel bad for people getting into kava, as sometimes you feel like you're drinking from the fire hose, with the barrier to entry being this terrible slope and everybody's saying all sorts of different things. It's overwhelming and it can cause anxiety, which is the exact opposite of what kava is supposed to bring into your life. If you've been a connoisseur of kava for the last few years, you're looking for a more advanced method, which is like the one that I posted up right here. But if you're a beginner with a couple of batches or less under your belt, and you're feeling overwhelmed, then this video is for you. First off, I'm not a medically trained physician, so none of what I say should be substituted for medical advice. So first things first, the quality and origin of your kava matters. Now, if you're looking after a run-of-the-mill kava experience, which is just medium sedation without the full spectrum of effects, you might want to hit pause here and just look up a quick TikTok video on kava, because this isn't going to be the surface level understanding. But for those who are still tuned in, I'm guessing you're keen on unraveling the mysteries that our island friends have been unearthing for centuries. You're not here for the average. You're here for the real deal, the authentic kava experience. And hopefully we can deliver that for you. We're gonna get deep in the weeds of the religious aspects of kava, and I won't be able to sum it up in a single episode, so this will be a starting point. The thing about kava is it's not your regular cup of coffee where the flavor tells the entire story. The full kava experience takes you on what seems to be a multi-dimensional journey. It's not just a drink, it's more like a guide. If you learn to brew it just right, if you can quiet down and you can truly listen to what the kava is trying to convey, a whole world of magic can really unfold before you. It's an experience that can reveal aspects of yourself, spark thoughts that you never knew were there, or open up a dialogue with a friend that you've never had, or even create deep connections with another that you can't really explain with mere words. Now, I'm a research physicist by education, and although I may be knee deep in the scientific trenches from time to time, the more I plunge into the depths of what we call reality, the more I find myself dipping my toes in the same profound beliefs that a hero of mine, the great Albert Einstein, held dear, which is the existence of a symbiotic relationship in the dance between science and spirituality. One cannot exist without the other. And the more I drink and learn about kava, the more I realize there is a deep dialogue with this sacred beverage that I'm barely able to scratch the surface of. From an outsider's perspective, the seemingly ordinary act of sharing a bowl of murky brown liquid can seem cultish and shamanistic. However, these ritualistic customs in kava ceremonies speak to a finer, almost spiritual realm with the divine woven into the fabric of each act. I think the best way to approach this is with a depth of humility and a deep amount of respect. Like, we often think that with all the education we've had in this day and age that we know better, but we don't. And our ancestors were not stupid. And they may not have had the vocabulary to explain it, but they knew what they were doing. The rituals of batching kava and drinking kava together are not just about strict tradition and unquestioning devotion. It's about seeking understanding and connection to both the present and the ancient past. This is a concept that is foreign to the Western world, but when you're involved in a kava ceremony, there's definitely a feeling of a connection to a much greater human experience that transcends space and time. It's not like sitting around and drinking beers while playing board games with your friends. It's much more primal, it's emotional. Kava ceremonies were often conducted to honor deities, to reveal truths, or to mark significant events, weddings, deaths, important holidays. The drink was believed to facilitate a connection between the mortal realm and the spiritual world. Historical accounts from early explorers often speak to the central role of kava in these religious rituals. You'll hear highlights of the meticulous preparation, the communal aspects of its consumption, and the profound spiritual experiences associated with partaking in the sacred drink. So when we talk about kava as a drink from the gods, we're not just spinning a tale out here. We're drawing on the rich tapestry of the Polynesian cultural history. I like to get a dive deeper into it, but for now, what you can take away is this isn't a beverage that is something to be taken lightly. It's similar to breaking bread and toasting a glass of wine as representations of the body and blood of Christ. Saluting up a bowl of kava is taking part in an ancient historical practice to remember our elders and opening up conversations with the gods. Who or what this god is of course for you to explore. Now back to present time. As you dive into the world of kava, you'll quickly learn that chasing that initial sedative hit you've seen on social media isn't really the key to understanding the strength of the brew. It's a bit like your first encounter with hard liquor. You got your cheap bottles of vodka giving you that heavy buzz, but that drunk is nasty and the hangover regret lingers. Then as you become wiser and explorative, there's the smoother, pricier stuff where the buzz is cleaner, it tastes decent, and your mind is more awake to the experience, and you remember more fun times with your friends, and the morning after is a little bit more forgiving. Kava tends to follow a similar rhythm. Opting for the budget styles of kava might give you a hefty sedative kick in the beginning, but it's not the clean, enjoyable vibe that you're after and can often make you feel terrible the next day. And furthermore, only focusing on that sedative hit up front might cloud your radar, making it hard to catch the calming effects that you're actually seeking. Trust me, you'll end up using more and spending more just to get to that sweet spot in the end. It's a bit of a seesaw. But when you master the art of extracting a quality kava, it's a real game changer. When you brew it right and you learn to listen to the kava, you can experience this clarity, this release of stress, this smooth exploration of thoughts, and the journey becomes a whole lot more enjoyable. Now let's talk about knowing what kava to buy, which is a whole nother animal. We don't judge it by taste, obviously, as most kavas don't win awards for flavor. There are a multitude of categories for kava, and it's overwhelming to understand them as a beginner. There's cerebral styles, euphoria-like styles, heavy sedative ones, balanced calms, mood-lifting, artsy-fartsy ones, quick onset, lingering onset, and a few other styles. But we'll focus on 3 generic categories I think sum up mostly of what people are looking for, and these categories are heady, balanced, and sedative. I generally avoid sedatives because the experience is relatively one-dimensional, and I'm looking more for the enhanced calming effects. Fijian waka kavas are usually on the more sedative side. Waka roots are literally only lateral roots. We'll talk about that later on. This is the closer one to an alcohol drunk in my opinion. Styles like this are the Fijian wakas, Papua New Guinea islas, the Tongan ceremonials, some heavy Vanuatu kavas like Borogoru, or generally any kava with mostly lateral roots. There's nothing wrong with taking kava to feel crunked, and if you drink them for that, more power to you. Just keep in mind when you aim for a higher body heft, inevitably you sacrifice some of the calming clarity. Also, you usually can't drive afterwards. And this is exactly where balanced kavas come in. You're looking here at the Vanuatu classics like Palasi, Palarasul, Burkar, Melo Melo, some Solomon styles, blends like our Statera, or even our Connoisseur at times. These kavas can be used for a multitude of situations, like social nights out on the town, deep meditative practices, hangout sessions with your besties, anything pretty much. They're versatile and adaptable. The last category are the cerebral styles. These kavas are pretty unique, and they're usually rare to find like legitimate versions of them. They tend to run lighter in taste, they're less spicy, they're more woody, and these are ones like our raw epicure, the kelai, our wakea and kahuna styles, hanakapi ai. Cerebral kavas are used more for artsy and open-minded situations, like suppressing your ego to finish that last chapter of the memoir, or finally wetting the paintbrush so that you can finish a canvas that you've been staring blankly at for the last few months. Now after that, we can talk about the root ratios. There are two types of root categories, which are the basal and the lateral roots. If you pull a plant out of the ground, there's generally a number of thick roots that are stemming from the body of the plant, and these are the basal ones. Then there are a number of the smaller roots that spread out like little fingers across the soil, and these are called the lateral roots. Generally, a kava plant will have a ratio of about 30 to 70 lateral roots to basal roots, plus or minus like 4 or 5%. This is how God created it, and it gives a well-balanced effect for most chemotype profiles. Sometimes when people are not satisfied with the natural chemotype of a kava plant, they can further change it up by modifying the concentrations of one root style or the other to play with the resulting chemotype effects. This is because lateral roots tend to have a higher Kavalactone percent, and they lean more toward the heavier, more sedative effects. Lateral roots often harbor higher amounts of dihydroclavane, which is the muscle loosening active. It slows down your body movements and sensations. Mixtures are commonly seen, such as like a 50-50 lateral basal or 60-40 mixture of lateral basal, or sometimes pure lateral to get a bigger heft. Do keep in mind, full lateral can sometimes give you the hangover-like symptoms. You probably heard me talking about something called the Kavalactones, and these are the actives. Again, this is a subject we can go a whole hour on, or many hours on, as there's so much fascinating history and information about them, especially the chemical makeup. We've got a lineup, I think it's of like 19 Kavalactones, but the top 6 are the real headliners that you need to pay attention to. And these are the ones that are believed to be pulling the strings on your central nervous system, specifically your GABA receptor. The different Kavalactones work off different areas, bringing different vibes to the party. So kavane, which is number 4, is like the anxiety releaser. Dihydroconvate and methysticin, which is number 2 and 5 respectively. They bring their own anesthetic groove. They're the ones that give that sedative effect. Now there's also Kava chemotypes, which is a fancy term representing the 6-digit code that unveils the distinctive order of these 6 active densities in your kava. You can picture it like the DNA of your kava, deciding what effects it will inevitably unveil on you. And depending on the variety and the age of the plant, these codes dance in wild variations. So you can think of all these kavas almost as different characters in a play, each with its own chemotype personality. This is why we treat the chemotypes like a different playlist for different moods. Like take our recent connoisseur batch, a 243516 chemotype, more of a dihydroclavane with a good amount of kavane followed by it, and yangonen following. And if you have 2 blends that share the same chemotype, or like our connoisseur and our brava, it means they'll vibe in like a similar zone, but they're not going to be identical, you see, because there's the gaps that are between these numbers that also matter. If you take the ratio of dihydroclavane to kavane in our connoisseur blend, you're seeing around like a 2.3 ratio versus brava, which is around 2.9. And so this translates to Baraba leaning more towards sedation, while connoisseur keeps sedation high but leans more towards a balanced feeling. So let me recount to you a story of one of the first Westerners to experience a kava ceremony. This is an excerpt from Lebo's Pacific Elixir, which I highly recommend if you're interested in getting into this, into the world of kava. This is an account taken by George Forster, who was a naturalist on James Cook, who was an explorer, his second Pacific voyage in 1773. Kava is made in the most disgusting manner that can be imagined. From the juice contained in the roots of the species of pepper tree, this root is cut small and the pieces chewed by several people who spit the macerated mass into a bowl where some water, milk of coconuts is poured upon it. They then strain it through a quantity of the fibers of coconuts, squeezing the chips till all of their juices mix with the coconut milk, and the whole liquor is decanted into another bowl. They swallow this nauseous stuff as fast as possible, and some old toppers value themselves on being able to empty a great number of bowls. So the most important thing besides picking a kava is the bag and then the water. Bag is, this is where tradition meets science. I used to recommend traditional bags, not like coconut husk, but like a standard muslin bag. Now I recommend 75 micron nut bags. And this is because when using cloth bags, a lot of the Kavalactones, which are lipid molecules, they tend to also get stuck within the fibers. So imagine filtering an oily, thick solution like oil through a t-shirt. You'll get most of it through, but a decent chunk will be stuck in the shirt. And using a nylon bag, it doesn't really get stuck in as much. Water should be room temperature or a little bit warmer. The actives in kava are not soluble in water, which is why you need to mesh the bag. You can vary up or down to create a stronger experience, but in general, expect about 2 tablespoons of traditional kava with 6 to 8 ounces of water. You can make more, but try not to make less as it's harder to batch it out. So the process is pretty simple. You get a nut bag. The reason I pick 75 micron nut bags is because 100 microns has pores that are slightly larger, and for some reason 100 microns is right around the area where more of the root material ends up coming into the drink, and it upsets my stomach. So I noticed that if I start using 75 micron nut bags, then I don't get that stomach upset. So that's why we started using those in the manufacturing process. If kava doesn't really upset your stomach, then 100 micron bags are perfectly fine. Pour in your water. I like to pour in the water on the top through, because then it helps to just push more of the active ingredients out. And then you let it sit for a little bit. You start to mesh the bag back and forth. The process takes about 10 to 15 minutes. You'll see the color of the water starting to change, and it'll start to get like a brownish, sometimes yellowish tint to it, have a little bit of an oily film on top. After about that time, take the bag out and you set it aside, and then you go ahead and enjoy. My personal preference is to get a small freezer bag, put it into a freezer. I usually flatten it out so you make it easier to break up the chunks so you can use it again later. And then just Sharpie the date that's on it to the day that you put it in, so you don't end up using kava that's like 3 years old. This is probably where we differentiate ourselves from other videos, because I like to save the root for like larger batches later on. You can do the same method as you would with instead of meshing it the first time around. And in my experience, you get a slightly heavier grog with this blender because it really works the lateral roots. But I usually like to do the traditional style first. Because this kava was extracted previously, then a lower water to kava ratio is needed. So about the amount you would want for a single batch, with 2 to 3 times the amount of pre-batch kava. And the heat is going to help loosen the actives, and the blender will help to knock them out better. So what you'll need here is a water boiler, some bottles so that you can store the kava in, and then you have all your frozen leftovers. When you have enough, you take the frozen leftovers out, you break it up, you throw it into your blender, pour in hot water on top of the kava, and then you let it sit for 20 minutes, and then you run the blender for 2 to 5 minutes. Then once you're done, you pour it through your mesh bag, you squeeze it, and you enjoy. And this is going to be a little warm, so if you want to drink it right now, throw it on some ice. So when you're drinking kava the traditional way, it's useful to set your atmosphere. And this means picking and preparing the area you're going to be drinking it in. Morning times are not the best as kava can make you lazy. So if you have a lot of things to do throughout the day, it's probably better to drink it more near the afternoon or in the evening. Traditionally for drinking kava, you would sit on the ground cross-legged. If you can, dim the lights around. If you can't dim the lights, go ahead and turn them off and play with either candles, lamps, or anything else that you may have that has more of a yellow glow. Not too dark though. We're not trying to go to sleep here. We're just trying to get rid of the intense artificial white lights and really set the mood. So this is my daughter's rainbow LED globe. You can actually see it behind me. It was a gift, but it's probably under $20. And also make sure to remove your shoes. If it's warm enough, I usually recommend removing the socks as well so you can ground your feet back to the floor. And of course, make sure to drink kava on an empty stomach. So definitely don't drink it after a really large meal. I usually try to wait at least 2.5 hours after a meal. Traditionally in the nakamalls, they drink it before they're going to go, like after work, before they're going to go and have dinner at home. So just as a heads up, if you're the type of person that turns on music every time you walk into a room or you play the TV on in the background, you might not be very comfortable with silence. And I'm not judging. I just want you to know that this may feel a little bit uncomfortable in the beginning, but just give it a shot because it makes the experience so much better. Make sure to remove all distractions, turn off the television, close computers, iPads. If you have Apple Watches and phones and stuff, just smartphones, put them away. And then you just go ahead and take your first cup, maybe play with a meditation, calm down, just listen to yourself. After about 10 to 15 minutes, you'll start to feel a little bit of a change and it'll just get better and better the more you do it. Now onto that subject, why does it get better, you ask? And that's because kava has something that we call a reverse tolerance. So it turns out that the more that you dance with kava, the more that it reveals its magic. And before we get to that, let me tell you a quick story about my first time having kava. It was a hot and sticky New York afternoon in 2015. I woke up feeling the full aftermath of $5 beer and shots and the highly addictive picklebacks that we had been slugging till 4 a.m. in Brooklyn. I opened the window for fresh air and half noticed a bar that seemed to be opening up sometime this week. My regular activities during times like this was to pick up some $1.99 peanut butter noodles about 10 blocks south in Lower East Side. Trust me, they sound strange, but they're a taste of pure magic. It's sweet, salty, soy saucy goodness. So after 2 servings of this delicious noodle masterpiece, I popped around the corner to see a sign proclaiming how alcohol is a thing of the past. And so it wasn't a bar, at least the one that I'm used to. My curiosity was piqued and I asked if they're open. I don't really remember what he said, but he invited me in to give it a shot. I could barely understand what the guy was talking about. It was something about like a root from the South Pacific, and I'm no stranger to ginseng drinks and all sorts of green juice gut cleansing stuff, so I wasn't really put off when he offered me this wide mouth cup filled with something that looked like mud. But I drank it and my tongue felt like it got a light shot of Novocaine from the dentist. And after a couple more, I parted ways. He offered it on the house since they hadn't set up their payment system, but I insisted on supporting them. Had I realized it was going to be like $30, I probably would have at least taken the first one on the house. Anyways, I went home and nothing really happened. So a couple days later, I was working late and I noticed out the window that there are people that are hanging around the medicine bar. And so I decided to drop down and visit again. I went through the whole introductory spiel as the guy clearly didn't remember our first encounter, but he seemed cheerful. So I went through another 3 to 4 cups of the stuff. And after about 20 minutes chatting with this friendly man 2 chairs down, I began to get extremely nauseated and decided to head home to my apartment across the street, rather than to use the tiny toilet that was at the bar. So I barely made it across the street when I vomited my paycheck all over the planter just 10 steps from the apartment. It was not my proudest moment. So stubborn as ever, I returned for round 3. This time the magic kicks in and this subtle calming wave of relaxation washes over me. I'm deep in conversation with this friendly lady that's next to me, but the TV playing Planet Earth with an octopus that's like gliding across the ocean floor begins to encompass all of my attention. And I begin imagining that I'm swimming alongside this friendly cephalopod and I have no cares in the world. And me and my octopus homie are cruising around the ocean floor. And that was until the nausea creeped back, and not being my first rodeo, I immediately apologized to my new friend and stepped out into the fresh city air. Luckily for me, at that time, the discomfort started to ease and I find myself strolling towards the park. And the rest of that night is a bit of a blur, but I do remember that overwhelming calm and relaxation that I felt as I walked down the block and through the city. And it stuck with me and it changed the trajectory of my life. And maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was something more, but it became one of the most blissful experiences of my life up to that point. I remember thinking two things. Number one was everybody needs to learn about this. Number two is sometimes it's good to be stubborn. So that's my story of reverse tolerance, and it's kind of like a mystical mountain some newcomers need to climb. First timers might miss the effects initially, but with each round, Kava opens up more of its secrets. I personally believe it has something to do with whatever you used to previously use to relax before you got into Kava. Most people drink alcohol every couple days, which tends to damage your central nervous system, making it harder for your body to work with the Kava. As your system heals, the Kava tends to become stronger, and you might think this is only for alcoholics, and I'm not an alcoholic, but newsflash, if you drink a minimum of 2 drinks per week, that's the barrier to start damage on your nervous system. Which is another reason why you may feel anxious at the end of the day, because your body created this positive feedback loop to get alcohol into your system just to feel normal. Between you and me, that's not normal, and way more people are addicted than they think. But that's a story for another day. I think that's the first step in the 12-step program is denial, right? The strength of the Kava experience tends to hinge on factors like health, medications, body weight, and the things that you ate and like what your normal diet is, and yes, your previous alcohol tolerance. Again, I'm not a medically trained physician and I'm not a researcher working for an educational institution or pharmaceutical conglomerate. I can only regurgitate what I've read in research-backed articles and share my opinions on them. So my opinion, take it however you want, is that I have not read a single legitimately backed study showing a clinical trial or adverse case that actually proves that Kava has a detrimental effect on the liver. Sometimes people do ask if Kava is addictive, and having worked with multiple families who had people with loved ones who are legitimately struggling with things like benzodiazepines, opiates, and alcohol, which ironically, alcohol is the hardest one to kick that I've seen. My opinion is that no, Kava is not addictive. But again, this is not medical advice, just my opinion. I struggle with alcohol withdrawal. I struggle with sugar, carb withdrawal, social media withdrawal, and a couple of other terrible substances, but I never struggled with Kava withdrawal. I believe it can be situationally addictive, as you want to enjoy it whenever you're with your friends. And like you have Kava with your friends, you have Kava with your friends, and kind of like Pavlov's dog, you end up situationally thinking that you want to have Kava with your friends. But I personally have never experienced cravings, needs, or feelings of anxiety if I don't have it, which I can't say about the other substances, especially social media. If you look at the mechanism of action of Kava, this becomes a little bit more clear, but we'll go over that in another episode. So this is not talked about as often as it should be, but Kava is a diuretic. Similar to tea, coffee, alcohol, it can dehydrate you. So staying hydrated is a crucial point, but it's not just about chugging water. I'm talking more about balancing your electrolytes as well. Without these salts, your body will struggle to retain water and it just ends up just shooting through you because it needs the salts to help balance the liquids inside and outside of the cells. Without them, it's kind of like trying to fill a leaky bucket. So especially the morning after, it's important to keep your electrolytes balanced. An effective remedy is adding a teaspoon of Himalayan salt to a glass of water. Everybody has a different ratio of electrolytes that they need in their body. But after drinking that, after waking up, it'll usually help with any types of dehydration symptoms or foggy mind. Well, that about wraps it up for most of the questions that I regularly see about Kava when people are first getting into it. And again, these are all suggestions and recommendations, so don't feel like you have to have everything perfect. Just work with what you have, play with these examples, and enjoy the process. We hope you have a wonderful week. And if you're enjoying these videos, please take the time to like and subscribe so we know we're on the right track and that we're actually bringing value to you guys. So from our ohana to yours, mahalo nui.